And today we're starting a brand new message called Not Buying It. And it's a phrase that I wish my wife would use more. When we go shopping, I'm not buying it. I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to buy it. And I apologize because she's in our parent lounge listening to me right now. So maybe you've used this phrase before, I'm not buying it. Whether you have kids or you've worked with kids or young people. I've worked with young people and children for many years and was a youth pastor and children's pastor. And you would ask them for help. You would ask them to do something. You'd ask them to be somewhere. And it's incredible how creative children and young people are when it comes to excuses. Whether it's you're working with them or your kids. Maybe you've asked your child to tidy their room. And then they've just, in that moment, become the most creative person in the world because they're so good at creating excuses. And what you say in response to their excuse, whether it's the dog ate my homework, or I can't find this, or I can't do that, we tell them because we can see it as it is. It's just an excuse. We say the phrase, I'm not buying it. When your child comes and says, I can't do this because, or I'm not tidying my room because a dog ate my homework, whatever the excuse is, we don't buy it because we can see it as it is. And all of us have been coming up with excuses for a long time. It maybe started as children and we wanted to get out of things, and then young people. And then as life got complicated and busier, we just kept going with excuses. And for some of us, it's just second nature, just throwing excuses here and there to get out of things and not willing to try things because of fear, insecurities, past events. And what we do is we tend to hide behind our excuses. We set up an excuse. It's like a wall around us, and it makes us feel safe and comfortable. But it stops us from living out our purpose, and we hide behind our excuses because we don't want to deal with what's in front of us, so we'll make an excuse and we'll hide behind it. And from a distance, they seem like real obstacles, and that means they can sound like real reasons. We've become really good at wrapping up our excuses as valid reasons, and we liken it to a paper wall. From a distance, a paper wall looks like a real obstacle. It's something that we can't get through. It's going to be difficult. But when we get up and close to it, we realize we could just poke our way through it. And it's easy to just walk through and break through. So what seems from a distance to be an obstacle is actually just something simple that we can break through. So it's not really an obstacle. It's an obstacle that you've put there, that you try and hide behind, and you don't want to face whatever you're wanting to face. And then we do a good job and wrap up our reasons. But we try and sell them as that, don't we? We take this excuse and polish it and make sure we've got the right language around it, and we present it in such a way that it's a reason. Because there are some valid reasons, like I don't have the time. Maybe you genuinely don't have the time, but you can make time. So it could be an excuse, or it could be something like a reason that we've just wrapped up and said, here, take it. And you just need to work out person by person, is it an excuse? Oh, I don't have the money. Or is that a reason? They might genuinely not have money, or they just don't prioritize. So there's different reasons, there's different excuses, and we need to work out what the difference is between them, because so often we're so good at just excuses. And we need people who love us to tell us, I'm not buying it. Because there's a fine line between a reason and an excuse. Is it true? Is it not? Could they work it out? Could they not? But we need people who love us to call us out on it. And over time, if we're not careful, our excuses become becauses. I can't do that because. I can't go there because. I don't want to do that because. I don't want to help because. I don't want to deal with that because. We all have our becauses. If I ask you, why don't you forgive? Why don't you stop? Why do you do that? Why did you say that? Why do you hurt people? Because. And you may have a reason, and you might just say, because. Why did you hurt that person? Because. Why did you say that thing? Because. Why did you go there? Because. And often our becauses aren't really the causes. It's a line that we make. There's a difference between a because and the cause. It's an excuse masquerading as a cause. And we take the cause because I can't do this because. But again, that's just an excuse. We just wrap it up. It's just different language for the same things. I can't do that because, and it's an excuse coming your way. And the truth is, we're just making excuses. Our becauses are just excuses. And we can become so convinced by our own excuses that we actually can convince others. We lie to ourselves so much that we believe what we are actually saying to ourselves, the lies that we believe, and then other people will begin to believe the lies too. We can create a sob story in our head, and then we share that sob story, and people will feel sorry for us and love us and care for us. And then it just becomes a lie that I believe for myself and you believe about me too. But they're all excuses. And an excuse that I have is at the start of the year in January, as all good Januaries go, you want to be healthier, fitter, stronger, all these amazing things. So I bought myself one of these in January. I decided to buy myself an ice bath. Crazy or not, I don't know. But it's got health benefits. So I was like, I'm going to do it. So I was away for a while and I was like, okay, if I get into cold water 5 days in a row, I'm going to go home, I'm going to buy it, I'm going to set it up, and I'm going to use it. If I can do it on holiday for 5 days, I'm going to do it every day in the house. Or so I thought. So I set it up. Looks all good. Got all the pieces. It's set up in the garden. And then I don't have an outdoor tap. So I'm like, how am I going to fill this up? So I was like, okay, I'll fill it internally and then just take the buckets out and fill the buckets. And then I realized I didn't have a bucket. So then what I had to do is I had to get jugs in the house, fill up the jugs, walk outside, pour it in, and realize that I didn't even finish, cover the bottom. So I just had to keep doing that all day long. Eventually, filled it up, and then I got in, and it was great. Sat there for 3 minutes. It was cold, and because I'm so tall, like it's a real like squeeze. I'm like, okay, do I put my legs here? Put my legs there? How do I get into this thing? So I got in, done it, felt amazing. All the health benefits. It's just all in one. It's just amazing. And then I was like, oh, it's a little bit annoying because I have to go from outside being wet, bring it inside, and then I've got my wet footprints just going all throughout the house. I'm like, that's a bit annoying, isn't it? And then I had to take it down because it was dirty and then cleaned it. And then I was like, oh, I need to fill it again. And the time I went in it was during our 21 days of prayer and fasting. So I hadn't ate for a few days, and then I got in and I felt a little bit weak. And I was like, okay, my excuse is because I don't feel great right now, I'll wait until after prayer and fasting. So cleaned it out, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I've used it a grand total of once. I never got back to it after our push in January, our prayer and fasting. And I thought about it this week. I'm like, we're in October, and I feel like I couldn't believe that I actually bought it in January. I felt like it was only a month ago where I was like, oh, I will get to it. And I just never have, because the excuse was, well, I don't have an outdoor tap, so it's awkward to fill up. Then there's puddles inside, don't really want that. Then I've got prayer and fasting, and I didn't really feel great, so then I was like, okay, I'll postpone it. So I had excuse after excuse after excuse. And I really do want to get back into it. And the worst thing is, my landlord decided to install an indoor tap this week. So this week, that's an excuse gone. So hopefully by next Sunday, I can stand here and tell you that that was me. That I got into the ice bath and done it. Because no more, like, what is my excuse? Like, it's literally, the tap's there now. Puddles, just wipe it up after yourself and everything will be fine. So maybe it's just something trivial like that. It's like, you just make an excuse for but maybe it's a big deal. Maybe there's something bigger in your life that you're making excuses over. And the reality is, we know, and other people know, when we try to fabricate excuses as reasons. And my wife's very good at this when we're sitting eating our dinner and we look outside and she just sees the empty ice bath. And every now and again it's like, when are you going to get in that? Well, haven't you been in that for a while? You spent money on that. You complain to me when I spend money and you've spent money and you haven't even used it. And we're so good. The reality is, other people see it in us when we try and fabricate excuses as reasons. It's like, oh, Anna, there's no tap. If you want to fill it up, I'll do it. And then even if she did fill it, I probably wouldn't do it anyway. But we're so good at excuses. But we need people who love us And maybe you've had this before. People who love you have tried telling you the truth. We need people in our lives that will just tell us the truth. Tell us, I'm not buying it no more. Stop making excuses. And there's a truth that I want to tell you, and as a Christ follower, it's a reminder. If you're not a Christ follower, maybe you're hearing this for the first time. But the truth is that God loves you the way you are. With all your excuses, with all your reasons, with all your becauses, He loves you. But it goes more than that. God loves you too much to leave you the way you are. He wants to take those excuses, take those reasons, take those becauses, and lead you to your extraordinary purpose. And we can't follow Jesus and live behind our manufactured lies and allow excuses to be the lords of our life. The excuses in our lives become bosses, lords, kings, telling us what we can do and can't do, where we can go and where we can't go. And how can Jesus be the Lord of our life and say, hey, I've got an extraordinary purpose for you, I've got a plan for you, but excuses are the Lord of our life, saying, no, you can't do that. No, you can't go that way. So we can't follow Jesus and live behind our manufactured lies and allow excuses to be the lords of our lives. So we all have reasons. We all have excuses. We all have becauses. But the question I want to ask today is, how would Jesus respond to your so-called reasons? Maybe you're not a Christ follower and your answer is, I don't care. I don't care how Jesus responds to me. But if you're a Christ follower, how should we respond when we give reasons? And hopefully if you're not a Christ follower, this will still be helpful to you to get God's insight on how excuses wreck people's lives and rob us from living out our potential. And if we could summarize it, how would Jesus respond to our so-called reasons? I think Jesus would call our bluff. He would say to us, I'm not buying it. I know for so long you've been making excuses, and Jesus would just say to you, stop making excuses. Why do you keep making the same excuse? And Jesus is so good at that, and we need people like that in our lives, people who love us and care for us, that will tell us the hard facts. Stop doing that. Stop making excuses. Why did you do this? And we need people to just shake us sometimes. And Jesus had a habit of not being very Christ-like at times. We sometimes think of Jesus as this soft and gentle person. Blonde hair, blue eyes. He just talks about love and he's caring and he just wants to cuddle us and make sure that we feel loved and everything like that. But actually, Jesus responds like someone who actually cares. You have it, I have it. People in life who are acquaintances or friends, and they just go along with it. They will go along with your bad ideas. They will go along with your excuses. But then you have people in your life who actually care and love you. So they won't go along with your excuses and your lies because they want what's best for you. They don't want you to sacrifice your life to an excuse. They want you to live out your life to the fullest possibility. And they want you to take every opportunity and not lose out because you're hiding behind walls that we've created for ourselves. And there's a story in the Bible of Jesus, and he offers this man an opportunity of a lifetime. He says, I would come follow me. I would love if you'd come follow me. Come see what I do. Come with me. We'll hang out. We'll do this. We'll do that. We'll change the world. And this man was like, oh, well, let me think. Well, I need to do this. I need to leave the bins out. Oh, I need to buy the shopping. And this man is just creating excuse after excuse after excuse. And Jesus just called him out. He was like, that's an excuse. Why are you just fabricating something? And why are you delaying this? Because I've invited you to follow me. I've invited you to have your name in lights, to change the world with me. But you've got an excuse. And maybe the man feared something. Maybe there was something that he feared. Maybe there was a deep-seated thing in his life. But an opportunity of a lifetime knocked at his door. And he delayed. And there was an excuse after excuse after excuse. And he missed out this opportunity of a lifetime. So instead of following Jesus, changing the world, making a difference, he just stayed at home. And the name of this person is Nobody knows. Because he played it safe, because he delayed it, because he had excuses, he never made a difference. And we see this in life, that people who just excuse their life away never truly make a difference. But we want to be a people that make a difference in this world. We want to be people that stand out and inspire other people. So Jesus was calling them out and says, come with me. And he missed out. But isn't that what love does? Love calls us out and names it for what it is. You need people in your life who will call you out and name it as it is. Someone to say, hey, you were rude. Hey, you shouldn't have done that. Hey, you were stupid. Do you have friends like that who love you? That's what love does. Love just doesn't sit down and be like, they can ruin their own life. They can do whatever they want to do. Love calls us out and names it for what it is. They tell us, Matthew, insert name here, that's not a reason. It's an excuse. We need people in our lives who love us and care for us enough to tell us these things. And we're going to read a passage found in the Gospel of Matthew. The book of Matthew was written by a man called Matthew, one of Jesus' disciples, and he was a tax collector. And he accepted the invitation to follow Jesus, and now we know his name. And we see the difference that Jesus made in Matthew's life, because Matthew didn't hide behind excuses and decided to follow Jesus. And as he followed Jesus, he wrote down everything Jesus said and Jesus did. And the passage that we're going to read is actually a parable that Jesus tells. And a parable is like a church word. It's a word that we find in the Bible. A parable is a story with a very specific point to a very specific group of people. So a parable is a made-up story. So Jesus is trying to get a point across, a specific point, to a specific group of people. So creates a story to get that point across. And we know this in life. We watch movies, we watch TV and publicity and whatever, and they tell a story to get a point across. So that's what Jesus is doing. He's telling a story to get a point across. And the context of this story is there's a rich man and there's some servants. And the rich man represents God and the servants represent us. And this rich man was going away on a journey, but before he went on his journey, he said to his servants, he got all three of them together. He said, I'm going on a journey. I'm going to give you some money to invest, and then I'll come back and see how you do. So he's got his three guys, and he gives them different amounts of money. And if you're a Christ follower, you may know this, the parable of the talents. He gives one person 5, one person 2, one person 1. And a talent is just an amount of money. So like 1 talent, 1 bar of gold, €1. It's an amount of money. So he gave him 5, he gave him 2, he gave him 1. And verse 15 says he gave them each according to their ability. So each servant had a different ability. So the one that had most ability got 5, then 2, then 1. So they all had different amounts. So the one with the 5 and the one with the 2, they went out and they invested their money and they doubled their money. That's a great investment. If you could double your money, well done. So the master comes back and he says, hey, so what did you do? And they were like, here's 10 and here's 4. And this is what his master replied in verse 23. It says, his master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things and I will put you in charge of many things. So for him, he was giving him 5 and giving him 2. And they used that resource, they stewarded that resource and doubled their money. But it goes on and the master says, come and share your master's happiness. So it's a win-win for both. The master has doubled his money. It's a great investment. But then the servants also get to share in the master's happiness. So they're loving life. They've done their hard work. They've done their due diligence and they've doubled their money. Now they're sharing in this master's happiness. And then we get to the third servant. And he had 1. And the master comes back and says, so how did it go? How did you get on with the investment? So the third servant says this in verse 24. He says, Master, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So he's saying, he's harvesting where you've not sown. He's telling him that he's a hard-working businessman. He's shrewd. He doesn't really care about some other people's feelings. He's a wheeler and dealer, and he does whatever it takes to get some cash. So he says, Master, the servant said, I knew that you're a hard man, harvesting and sowing where you've not scattered seeds. Which is a weird way to start. It's basically like saying, Master, before I tell you what I did with your money, you need to know it's not my fault. So before I start, yes, I'll tell you what happens with the money, but before I tell you what I did, it's not my fault. And you know when you hear that, it's not going to be good. When you ask your child, well, did you tidy your room? Well, before you get to my room, this is what happened. Did you do, before we get to that, when someone starts with an excuse, you know it's not good news. So he's basically saying, before I tell you before I've got an excuse, okay? He says, before I tell you what I did, you need to know it's not my fault. It wasn't me. And he actually probably adds insult to injury. He actually goes, it's your fault. It's actually your fault, and you'll hear why it's your fault that I didn't make any money. And he basically goes on to say, if you weren't the way you are, I wouldn't have done what I did. So it was out of my control. Because you're a madman, because you're a crazy businessman, you are scary, I was scared, I acted this way. So if we sum it up, it's your fault. Okay, sounds like an excuse. But these are the words recorded of what he actually said. He says, so I was afraid, because you were big, scary, crazy businessman, I was afraid, and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. So he was given 1 talent, 1 bit of gold, and then he just returned a messy, dirty 1 piece of gold. So his master replied saying, I understand, no worries. Here's a gift card. Get yourself some nice hot chocolate with sprinkles. It's going to be okay. No, he does not do that. The master is not happy. The master wasn't buying it. The master wasn't buying the excuse that he was putting forward, saying, well, it was your fault because you're crazy and I was a bit afraid and I didn't want to upset you, so I did the safe thing. I excused myself and just sort of buried it and kept it safe for you. And the master wasn't buying it. So the master says, you wicked and lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. So he's saying, well, you know that I'm a shrewd businessman. You know that I want to make a profit. And yet you did it anyway. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the banker so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. He didn't even go to the little bit of effort to put it into the bank to get some interest. He just buried it where he was. And really, there's no excuse for this. The servant can't manufacture an excuse good enough to say, well, I could have done it in the bank. And maybe you've been to that in that position before where you're trying to tell someone an excuse and they say something simple like, well, you could have done that. And then you find yourself being like, yeah, I probably could. And it's that awkward situation of like, they've just given you a simple way out and you hadn't even thought of it because you made an excuse. And that's what he was doing. There was no excuse for just burying it and doing no work. He allowed fear to blind him from an opportunity. He said, you're a shrewd businessman. You're a little bit crazy. You're mad. And I was afraid. I was afraid of how you reacted. So he allowed fear, and we do this too, to blind him from an opportunity. And obviously this is a made-up story, and we're seeing it as it comes to land. As Jesus lands this story, we see that the master calls his bodyguard and says this in verse 30. He says, throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And it sounds so extreme, weeping and gnashing of teeth. It doesn't mean a physical pain. It doesn't mean he's going to get hurt and injured. But this idea of weeping and gnashing of teeth refers to an intense frustration, disappointment, and regret. So the last servant who's been thrown out is now looking at the other 2 servants who are enjoying their master's happiness, all the blessings that come with it. And he says, you've been faithful with little, you'll be faithful with much. So they've been given more authority and more power. And he's now outside weeping and gnashing of teeth. He's just frustrated. He's missed an opportunity to share in the happiness. He's missed an opportunity to get more responsibility and authority. So he has this intense frustration, disappointment, and regret. And maybe excuses in your life has led you to being frustrated, to being disappointed, and to regretting some decisions that you made. And we look back and you're like, if only I had taken that opportunity, if only I didn't make an excuse, if only I had someone in my life who loved me to call me out and says, I'm not buying it anymore. And if you're not careful, you can excuse your life away. You can have excuses for everything. Oh, I can't hang out with the kids this weekend because I'm going to work overtime, because if I work overtime, then I'll get more money and then I can supply for the kids. And then it turns into every week is the same excuse. And then you've always got an excuse. And what started as just an excuse, and if we're not careful, we can excuse our family away. And what you think has only been a month is actually, you look back and the excuse was through their childhood, through their teenage years, and now they're an adult, and you've excused your relationship away with your kids. With your spouse, we can do the same thing. We can have excuses of like, oh, we don't have the money, we don't have the time to go on dates and love each other and be together. And if we're not careful, that excuse can come time and time and time again. And then we realize the last date we were on was honeymoon, all those years ago. And if we're not careful, we can excuse our life away. Just like I said in January, oh, next month, when we finish push, when we get this in order, I'll get in the ice bath. And now we're in October. And I'm like, where did the year go? The year has just went so fast. And if we're not careful, simple things like getting in an ice bath, or more complex things like your marriage, your relationships, your kids, your future can be excused away. Living behind our excuses will ultimately lead us to missing out in life. And maybe you know those people and you think, oh, they're always missing out. If only they would come hang out. If only they could have this opportunity. And we know people who always just sit at home and they're missing out on life. We have friends like that. You have friends like that who are missing out. But we can do the same when we live behind our excuses. We don't experience life and life to the full. We don't experience everything God has for us. And you might think, Jesus, you calm down. Like you're telling us a story about someone getting thrown out and someone having weeping and gnashing of teeth. And it's a bit intense. Like where's this soft and gentle Jesus who's supposed to love me and care for me and make me feel all mushy inside? But actually Jesus' intensity about this matter is because he loves you so intensely. You know this with your parents or friends who really love you. They will be intense about trying to get you back on track. Maybe you've had a moment in your life where you've needed intervention. And it's been someone in your life who loves you and cares for you, who's so intense about seeing your life turn around. So Jesus is so intense in this story because he loves you intensely. He doesn't want you to miss out. He doesn't want you to have excuses as the Lord of your life. He wants you to live out your extraordinary purpose and discover the plans and purpose God has for you. He loves you so much. And as we've already said, God loves you the way you are. But he loves you too much to leave you where you are. So he's going to be intense. He's going to say, I'm not buying it anymore. He's going to call your bluff and say, enough is enough. When are you going to stop making excuses? God doesn't want you to miss out on your extraordinary purpose. He doesn't want you to miss out on everything God has for you. So we've answered the question, how would Jesus respond to our so-called reasons? With intensity, with his love, because he intensely loves you. Not this soft, gentle Jesus, but because he loves and cares for you, he will call you out on your stuff. But I want it to be practical. I don't want us to just be like, he's gone on a bit about the excuses that we're making, doesn't it? Like, I'm just leaving here and I'm sad. I don't know how to work my life out. I want to give you 3 ways that we can respond to our so-called reasons. So how can we respond? Yes, we know how Jesus responds with his love and his care and his mercy and his intensity to call us out. But how can we respond? How can we take hold of our lives? How can we take hold of our excuses and get past, break through, respond to these so-called reasons? First way we can do it is diagnose the cause. Think about the excuses that you've been making. What are the cause? What is the real cause of the excuse? If I think simply about the ice bath, it's just discomfort. It's just annoying getting into freezing cold water. That's my excuse. The root of it is discomfort. But for you, what is really the reason behind your excuse? Is fear holding you back? Is insecurity holding you back? Are past events holding you back? Is it shame, hurt? What excuse are you making? But we need to diagnose it. What's really going on? Yes, I might have wrapped it up nicely. I may have articulated it really well, but what is the reason behind it? Is it fear? What am I afraid of? Is it discomfort? What is the cause? Second thing we can do is confront the root. When we discover, okay, I'm making this excuse, but this is the actual cause of this. So there's fear in my life. Then I need to confront the root of fear. I need to deal with fear in my life. I need to come to terms with the real reason behind my excuse. Not just to create a wall in front of me and say, this is my excuse, but to confront the root, to confront the hurt, the pain, the insecurity, the shame, the fear that is at the root of your excuse. And if you're a Christ follower, I want to encourage you this. If you're not a Christ follower, I want to give you this as an option. To ask God to meet your need. As Christ followers, we know this and we've been told this. God is good and he gives us so many great blessings that he can deal with our fear, he can deal with our hurt, he can deal with our insecurities. But yet, we forget. We forget to go to him. As Christ followers, we try and deal with things sometimes ourselves. And there's this old hymn called What a Friend We Have in Jesus. And it talks about how free life could be if we actually just turn to him. He wants to take our fears. He wants to take our insecurities. He wants to give us peace and comfort. All we need to do is ask him. So if you're not a Christ follower in here, you can turn to him. Today is the day you can turn to God and say, God, I need your help. All the excuses that I've been making is because I'm insecure. I don't know who I am. But in him you can find identity. And I'm so fearful. All the excuses that I'm making is because I'm afraid. I'm full of fear. But God gives you peace. God gives you comfort. So whatever is at the root of your excuse, God can deal with it. God is bigger than your excuse. God is bigger than the root of your excuses. God can do exceedingly more than we can ever ask, think, or imagine. So if you have something in your head thinking, well, God can't deal with this excuse. God can't deal with that fear. God can't deal with this root. Give it a shot. Ask him. God, take away this fear. Take away my insecurities. Heal me from my past hurt. Give it a shot. See what God can do in your life. And the last thing is move towards truth. And next week we're going to look at this idea of how can truth help us break through our excuses. Because we can't allow lies and fear to dictate how we live. We can't use fear to say, no, you're not allowed to go that way. You have to do this. Truth can set us free. We will know the truth. And when we know the truth can set us free. We don't need to live in bondage anymore. We don't need to live in fear anymore. God has a plan and purpose for our life. And we can't allow lies and fears to dictate how we live. God has given us power and authority to live out our extraordinary purpose. And if you want to be driven by fear, if you're a fearful person, it's like, oh, I can never get rid of fear. Well, why not fear missing out on who you could be and should be? If you want to keep fear in your life, why not be afraid of missing out on what you could be and should be? Instead of fearing what might happen, fear that I'm going to miss out on my potential. I fear that I'm actually going to miss out on everything God has called me to be. I'm going to miss out on what I could and should do. I fear the fact that excuses can rob me from my extraordinary purpose. So if you want fear, if you want to keep fear in your life, that's up to you. But I want to live in freedom. I don't want to live with fear dictating my life. I want to be driven by love. I want to be driven by God's example. I want to be inspired by people living out their extraordinary purpose. You have one. I have one. God wants you to live it out and not miss out on it. And we know He knows better. And if we're honest, we know better. We see it in our kids. It's like, oh, come on, you should know better. But when was the last time you turned yourself in the mirror and said, you should know better? Come on, Matthew. Come on. You should know better. And we know that God wants better for you. God just doesn't want you to just live life. He wants you to live life to the full, an abundant life. A life full of purpose and meaning that God has created for you.